The anime begins with two students playing the most famous online game in Japan, known as Attack Family. Then, we see that the protagonist, called Fumiya Tomasaki, tells us that his opponent is the class leader, a high-level character in real life. Well, he has it all: good looks, grades, he plays sports, and has all the girls around him. Instead, you could say that he, in reality, is the losing character. However, not in that game, since after all Tomasaki is the best player in Japan. Next, Shuji complains about his character. He thinks that he lost against Tomasaki because he made a bad choice of avatar. Tomasaki then explains that he actually had an advantage compared to him as he can recover quickly after being attacked. Shuji does not give importance to this and comments that, in his opinion, this is a mediocre game. At that moment, Tomasaki responds that the greatest shame of a player is to blame the game when he loses. Then, he proposes to exchange the characters and play another game. However, if he wins, Shuji must retract what he said about the game and accept his defeat. Finally, Tomasaki emerges again as victorious. Later, we see that two classmates are waiting for Shuji at the school entrance. However, he seems a little upset and invites them to a place he plans to go with his friends. Later, on the way home, Tomasaki finds himself reflecting on his surroundings, and remembers a phrase he read in a copypasta that says that life is a divine-level game. However, from their point of view, this is not the case because in real life they discriminate against you or treat you badly because of your face, really for anything that others consider inferior. Furthermore, these absurd rules that society has imposed are not challenged for any reason. A good example of this was his departure with his partner. Although he came out the winner, in real life Shuji is a first-rate character who was born with all the skills to get through life easily. That's why he thinks the game of life is trash. Suddenly, he receives an invitation to play from someone who is below him in the leaderboard, but very close to his number of games won. As you start the game, you realize that this individual has been perfecting his techniques and studying his moves. However, that is not enough to beat the best in the world. Finally, Tomasaki sees that in his message box he has an invitation from the unnamed player who invites him to meet, to which he accepts. The next morning, Tomasaki is pretending to sleep during the break and notices that no one is talking about his victory against Shuji yesterday. In the real world, everyone is overlooking this and pretending not to know. At that moment, a brown-haired classmate approaches the class leader to tell him that he must accompany her to the staff room. There, Tomasaki tells us that this girl's name is Ai Hinami, and she is the first in grades at her school, in addition to being perfect in everything she does. He is another real-life character who plays on easy mode. Later, Tomasaki meets Shuji and Ai on the stairs. The latter greets him and tells him that she found out that he and the class leader faced off in Attack Family, and would like to know how it ended. Tomasaki does not know what to say, so he remains silent looking at Shuji, and he admits that Tomasaki came out the winner of that match. In a change of scene, Tomasaki goes to a shopping center to meet Sin Nomber, as he is intrigued by what kind of person it is that could potentially beat him in the future. Suddenly, he realizes that it is a girl, and it is his classmate, Ai. Realizing that the person who beat her is a loser with no future, she becomes disappointed and can't help but show her discontent. Ai respected Nanashi, her character in Attack Family, but discovers that she is a person who gave up on life. Finally, Ai decides to go home, having lost interest in talking about the game with him. Immediately, Tomasaki goes after her and tells her that she cannot criticize him in that way, since she does not know what kind of life he has led. Ai then tells him that he lost and blames the game when he hasn't even tried, so he doesn't even deserve to be called a player. Next, he understands what she means, but in real life you can't change characters. If he were a top player like her, he would do a little better in daily life. Later, Ai takes him home and Tomasaki waits for her in her room. After a while, Ai returns, but Tomasaki fails to recognize her and thinks she is his younger sister. She explains to him that real-life characters are refined with effort. Then, he mentions that he is a boy and can't wear makeup. However, Ai clarifies that the way he is perceived involves many things. For example, the posture and gestures you make with your face will make you look more attractive. Not to mention that a minimum level of personal grooming is necessary to look presentable. Ai then confesses that she was disappointed when she realized that the person she admired is not only losing in the real-life game, but she doesn't even try, which makes her a loser. Therefore, he decides to teach him how to play. Later, Tomasaki asks him what place life occupies among his favorite games. Then, she explains to him that, for her, Attack Family and real life occupy the same level of importance. Upon hearing this, Tomasaki convinces himself and decides to start playing seriously to see if it is worth it. Therefore, he asks Ai what the rules of the game of life are. She mentions that this is a world with a lot of freedom and, just like in those types of games, the first thing is to create a good character. Later, they head to a restaurant where we realize that Ai really likes cheese. Next, he gives Tomasaki a mask and tells him that he must use it at all times to practice his facial muscles. While walking down the street, you should smile all the time. After this, Tomasaki says goodbye to Ai, and she asks him if he is forgetting something, and that is that they have not exchanged contacts yet. That same night, we see Tomasaki practicing his smile in front of the mirror. However, he is surprised by his sister, who who warns him not to embarrass her any more than she already does, seeming a little strange. In a scene change, Tomasaki and AI meet in the sewing room to establish the goals of the game. The objective is to talk to 3 girls in your class. The first is her neighbor Yuzu, and the second is the girl who sits next to her in class, Manami Nanami. However, Tomasaki realizes that this is easier said than done. She comments that at her school, girls can wear ties and bows, but there is an unwritten rule that only popular girls can wear ties. Unfortunately for him, all the girls he has to talk to belong to the latter group. Immediately afterwards, Tomasaki makes his first move with Yuzu, whom he asks for a handkerchief for his cold. However, after checking her bag, she realizes that she does not have one with her. Therefore, she asks the classmate who sits behind her, called Fuka Kikuchi. At that moment, Yuzu gets up from her seat to greet a friend and Tomasaki is left alone with Fuka, so he begins a conversation with her. On the way to his next class, Tomasaki remembers that AI had told him to make sure to talk to the girls when she was around. That way, if you make any mistakes, she could help you. As he enters economics class, he realizes that she is not there yet, so he is happy thinking that he can relax for a while. However, Manami is surprised to see that he arrived early for class and asks him why. Tomasaki begins to speak in an old-fashioned way, which causes her to burst into laughter. Next, his friend Hinabi arrives, along with Shuji and his friends, and asks him what's so funny. Then, Tomasaki explains that he was talking to Manami about how empathetic young women are these days, and she started laughing. Shuji tells Manami that he doesn't see anything funny in that and that she's just a weirdo. He then proposes a vote to decide who is the strangest in the class. At that moment, AI intervenes in the conversation. Shuji tells her that no one called her and that what is happening is none of her business. In response, she asks him if he is behaving that way to get revenge on Tomasaki because he recently beat her in Attack Family. Shuji drops the conversation after losing in the vote to be the class weirdo. Afterwards, we see how the girls breathe a sigh of relief and thank AI for helping them. Following this, the girls begin to joke with each other and seeing that they are going too far with the games, they continue their conversation. Later, Tomasaki and AI meet in the sewing room, where she tells him that her first mission was a success, despite some drawbacks, such as when he spoke like an old man and blew his nose in front of Fuka without any shame. Then, Tomasaki asks what is happening between Shuji and Hinabi, since he saw her a little uncomfortable next to him. Then, she tells him that they have had several fights because of the way she speaks and that, if it were possible, she would take care of her all the time. But that is not possible because it has happened several times that he bothers her with bad jokes. Then, he warns him that he should be careful with Shuji because he is an important member of the class. And if he were to have any confrontation with him, it would end with his social isolation in the class. Afterwards, AI instructs him to stand on tiptoe against the wall. At that moment, we see that he corrects his posture and mentions that this is an important point that can influence what others think of him. Therefore, you should always maintain your new posture, and you should also continue to interact with your classmates and make sure to participate in the conversation. Later, Tomasaki has the opportunity to go with AI and some companions on the way to the subway. Then, Tomasaki makes a strange comment that makes the boys uncomfortable, but AI is there to help him and he manages to escape the situation. Once on the subway, she tells Tomasaki that her mission is to get off at the same station as Minami and start a conversation with her. On the way to Minami's house, she tries to lighten the mood by making a joke to Tomasaki, since she noticed that he is very tense. Tomasaki tells her that he admires her way of being because she is always smiling, to which she responds that that is what life is about, being happy. He recommends that he smile a little more too, since he always seems very sad in class. He then asks if he and AI are in a relationship because he has noticed that they are spending more time together lately. Immediately, he clarifies that this cannot be possible, since he is a lower-level character, and is very far from being able to have something with her. Upon hearing this, Minami agrees with his comment, which offends Tomasaki, since he said it very quickly. Later, she tells him that he reminds her of her friend Hinabi, who always gives her opinion regardless of whether others agree. Instead, she leans toward the majority opinion to make things funnier, even if she doesn't agree. Finally, they say goodbye before arriving at Minami's house, without Tomasaki being able to express what he thought about it. The next morning, AI and Tomasaki meet in the sewing room, as usual, to review their achievements in the conversational experience. Tomasaki tells him that he has realized that in a group 2 types of people are always needed, the one who proposes topics and the one who extends the conversation. Later, AI gives him a notebook with notes on topics he must learn, so he will never run out of conversation topics. Then, she gives him a tape recorder to record the conversations he is having. She mentions that it is important for him to listen to how he speaks. After this, he tells him that tomorrow he will tell him his next goals, which surprises Tomasaki, since they don't have class on Saturdays. That is why she explains to him that he will spend that day with her. In a scene change, Tomasaki is late for his meeting with AI, but she forgives him because this time Tomasaki made minimal effort to present himself appropriately. Next, we realize that AI and Tomasaki are dressed in the same color. Later, they head to a clothing store and she reveals that her next goal is to have a makeover. To achieve this, your first step is to ask one of the salespeople to let you try on one of the outfits on the store's mannequins. Then, Tomasaki approaches one of the managers, trying not to forget what she asked him. But he confuses the words and asks if he can buy the mannequin. Hearing this, AI decides to intervene to help him. Later, we see that they are heading to a restaurant while waiting for their appointment for the new haircut that AI has prepared for him. This leaves Tomasaki impressed, but she changes the subject by saying that they should order a combo and share it. Tomasaki realizes that she really likes cheese, since both dishes have cheese. Afterwards, he asks if he listened to the recordings of their conversations and what he discovered when listening to himself. He mentions that he noticed that his voice sounded like he was whispering, which impressed him a lot since he had never heard it that way. At that moment, Fuka arrives with their request and, upon seeing Tomasaki, he remembers him and greets him. After he leaves the place, AI tells him that she has decided that her target will be Fuka since it seems that she has an interest in him. Tomasaki can't believe what AI is saying, but she explains that normally, when she is in a group, she is the first to be greeted because she knows everyone. However, when she arrived with the order, he noticed him first, and that's why he thinks she might have an interest in him. He doesn't think it's right to make her his girlfriend when he doesn't even know if he likes her. However, AI challenges him and asks if he has given up on the game of life. Immediately, Tomasaki decides to play seriously, and knows that to do so he must follow their advice. That is why he accepts that challenge. Later, we see Tomasaki looking at himself in the mirror, excited about his new haircut. Just then, her younger sister comes into the bathroom and tells her that she noticed her new haircut, and thinks she looks better lately. The next morning, Tomasaki goes to the meeting with AI very happy because he has already achieved an objective, and that is that someone around him noticed the changes he has achieved. For this reason, AI congratulates him for achieving one of his missions. Afterwards, she informs him that the goal is to talk to Izumi all week. Once in class, he tries to talk to her, but all of his interactions with her are awkward. At the end of the week, we see that he is already exhausted from trying to be social, so he heads to the library while waiting for his next class. In that place, he meets Fuka, who tells him that she has seen him many times go to the library during class changes, but he had not dared to interrupt him because he always saw him very focused on his reading. He asks if he is also a fan of the author Andy, since he always sees him reading his books. Upon hearing this, Tomasaki apologizes for not having noticed her all this time and responds that yes, he likes that author. Later, we discovered that he was actually going to that room to think about game tactics for Attack Family. After this, she tells him that she is actually writing a novel and would like him to read it to get his opinion. Finally, we see that Tomasaki and AI meet in the sewing room. Immediately afterwards, she listens to the recording of the conversation that Tomasaki had with Fuka and tells him that she is convinced that Fuka likes him. Tomasaki immediately responds that that cannot be possible, and he also feels guilty for having lied to him because he does not know the author Andy. However, AI scolds him, believing that it is very cruel of him to ignore Fuka's feelings, even if he chooses to deny it. Afterwards, he informs her that, as he heard, he failed that week's goal because he couldn't establish a talk with Izumi. Then, she encourages him and explains that the best thing about the game of life is that you have two options. You can continue from where you left off or start again. Once they finish their conversation, Tomasaki meets Izumi at the school exit and notices that she is sad. So he decides to ask her what's wrong, but she gets defensive and tells him it's none of his business. Consequently, he decides to walk away from the place, but she stops him and asks if she can teach him how to play Attack Family. Next, we see that Izumi and Tomasaki go home together. While they were walking, she reveals that she wants to learn how to play to impress Shuji, since she heard that Erika confessed and he rejected her. This made her think about their relationship because although he is always with her and she thought that maybe they had something special, she realized that that is not the case. However, Tomasaki asks him where they are going to meet to teach him how to play, so she suggests that they practice at home. Next, we see Izumi and Tomasaki immersed in a game. At that moment, she perceives that Tomasaki's skills are superior, and his movements in the game are impressive. Tomasaki, for his part, clarifies that he was simply using basic movements. Later, he points out that, although his fundamental knowledge of the game is correct, she is limited to using complicated combos that will not lead to victory without a prior strategy. Next, Tomasaki comes up with an idea, leaving Izumi surprised with his reaction. Finally, he details that his first objective will be to learn to make short jumps. She tries, but soon realizes that it is more difficult than she imagined. Therefore, Tomasaki provides you with a timer, telling you that the button is faulty and will not stop if pressed for a short period. Therefore, you should carry that stopwatch with you at all times and practice your short jump when no one is watching. That is the only way to perfect your playing technique. Suddenly, Izumi notices that while he was explaining all of this, his body language had changed. Because of her comment, he realizes that he was behaving like AI does during their meetings. He then tells you that once you memorize the main character's combos, it will be easier for you to apply them in the game. Therefore, it will provide you with a list with the movements. Looking at the page, Izumi is amazed by the number of moves and asks him if he really memorized all of them. Tomasaki responds that he not only learned the movements of the main characters, but also those of the rest of the avatars. Following this, Izumi asks him what the purpose of doing all that is. Then, Tomasaki clarifies that he does not do all this with the aim of winning friends or receiving praise, but because he likes the game. Hearing this, Izumi is surprised at her way of thinking, considering that it is just a game after all. For this reason, Tomasaki asks her about her perception of a video game, and she answers that when someone is too good at something, it stops being fun for others. It's like a total blackout from reality, plus people find it strange. Then, he asks him if he doesn't hate that attitude of others. To clarify the idea, Tomasaki asks him if what he really wants to know is if he cares about the opinion that others have of him. Tomasaki confesses that this does not worry him, since his main concern is setting the goal of being stronger and not achieving it. Hearing this, she asks him if it's uncomfortable for him to always be considered a weirdo at school, to which he responds that he believes there are more important things than simply laughing with friends and desperately seeking to be accepted. Next, Izumi confesses that she can't imagine thinking that way. Since she was little, she has led a life in which she always has to smile to be accepted and not be considered a stranger. He believes he couldn't change, even if he wanted to, because that's the only way of life he knows. At that moment, Tomasaki tells him that since he was born, he has maintained the same personality and way of thinking, which made life become an irrationally disposable game. However, he recently came across a player with an interesting personality who really stands out in the game. This player maintains that life is, in fact, a god-level game and managed to convince him to take this more seriously. Over time, he has learned strategies on how to push himself, and while doing so, he realized that real life, at least, is a good game. Therefore, he is sure that she too can change if she sets her mind to it. In a change of scene, we see that Tomasaki is in a cafe with AI to tell her what happened with Izumi. Hearing his whole story, she is impressed since she did not think that she would achieve her goal in an almost miraculous way. He then asks her if she has made the decision to ask Fuka out and hands her 2 tickets to a movie premiere. Finally, he suggests that if he decides to go out with Fuka, he uses those tickets to invite her. Following this, we see that Tomasaki is rehearsing in his room what he will say to Fuka, using the recorder that AI provided him. However, while trying to stop the recording, it accidentally switched to other pre-existing audio. Upon hearing it, he realized that it was AI, and perceived the great commitment she has to her personal improvement. The next day, we see that Tomasaki is in class with Izumi, who has improved rapidly, which makes him assume that he will soon be able to face Shunji. When they change classes, Tomasaki goes to the school library and runs into Fuka. Immediately, he confesses that the other day, when they spoke, he lied to her, since he does not know the author Andy and has never read any of his books. He feels that it was dishonest of him to have promised to read her novel. However, he has decided to start reading more often and read some of Andy's books. Therefore, he requests that you allow him to come next time so that they can discuss his novel. At that moment, Fuka gladly accepts his proposal and seems not to be bothered by the situation. At the end of classes, we observe Tomasaki in his classroom, deep in thought about recent events and how he will communicate them to AI. This is because, due to the misunderstanding with Fuka, he was unable to invite her to the movies. While he is immersed in these reflections, they reveal to us that AI is already waiting for him in the sewing room. Just as Tomasaki is about to head to his meeting, he is interrupted by Shuji's friends. Afterwards, he is taken to a room where Shuji is waiting to challenge him to a game of Attack Family. Tomasaki agrees, but suggests that he not do this yet, since he has heard that he has been practicing recently. Hearing this, Shuji accuses him of being conceited and asks how he knows that. Then, Tomasaki mentions that he has been talking with Izumi. The class leader admits that he has noticed that the two of them have been very close lately. Tomasaki realizes that Shuji has misinterpreted the situation, but he doesn't know how to explain it to him, so he decides to remain silent. Immediately afterwards, Izumi arrives at the location with the intention of challenging Shuji to a game, but then realizes that he will face Tomasaki. Shortly after, Erika and her friends also enter the room, so everyone decides to witness the game between Tomasaki and Shuji. Next, we hear Shuji mocking Tomasaki, saying that he has nowhere to run. However, Tomasaki responds that he will not be able to escape. Hearing this, everyone is surprised that the shy boy in the class said something like that. Once the game begins, everyone is impressed with the great skill of Tomasaki, who ends up defeating Shuji. Tomasaki tries to leave after finishing the game, but Shuji asks him to face each other again. At that moment, AI arrives at the place. She had gotten tired of waiting for him in the sewing room and was already on her way home, but she heard a lot of noise coming from the room as she passed through the hallway. After a while, one of Erika's friends tries to leave the place, excusing herself that she has extra classes. However, Shuji mentions that he knows that they attend those classes on weekends. This makes the girls decide to stay and continue watching as Shuji is defeated by Tomasaki again and again. Before Shuji can request another game, Erika interrupts him and questions why he becomes so obsessed with a simple game. Immediately, he tells her that what is happening is none of his business. This response offends Erika, who tells him that it started to be his business when he wouldn't let them leave. Furthermore, he realized that he has been practicing after school all this time, and despite this, he was not able to beat Tomasaki. Therefore, she can't believe she liked a pathetic boy who is obsessed with a trashy game. Upon hearing the latter, Tomasaki gets up from his seat and tells her that he will not accept a person like her, who makes fun of the efforts of others without even making an effort of her own. For this act, Erika despises Tomasaki and considers his attitude disgusting. However, Izumi comments that she agrees with Tomasaki and thinks it's okay to take things seriously. Even she has been practicing short jumps and finds Attack Family to be a fun, but complex game. Finally, Erika and her friends leave the place without saying another word. Following this, we see that Izumi collapses, as she was very scared by the verbal exchange she had with Erika. In response to this, Shuji rushes to her side and comforts her. In a scene change, we see that Tomasaki tells Ai what happened with Fuka. He then invites her to go to the movies with the tickets she provided, but she informs him that she can't at that time due to club activities. However, he's free after class, so he suggests they watch another movie. Tomasaki is excited, since this will be his first date with a girl. Later, we observe Tomasaki in his room, immersed in a game of takfum. At that point, we learn that he has already had his date with Ai. After the movie, they decided to go to a cafe, where the conversation revolved around their progress. Finally, you come to the conclusion that you have begun to understand how to advance in the game of life. He realizes that the key is repetition and applying what he has learned. The next morning, Tomasaki approaches Izumi determined to take the initiative to talk to her. Next, he mentions that Shuji's birthday will be soon and wants to know if he has already selected a gift. However, Izumi finds his question too direct, which raises her suspicions about Tomasaki's intentions and how he obtained that information. Later, the class leader's friend named Mizusawa addresses Tomasaki after class is over. When Tomasaki sees him, he is surprised, because he thinks that they are requesting him again for a takfum game. Following his comment, Mizusawa begins to laugh and explains to Tomasaki that she decided to approach him because of the surprise that his behavior caused her the day he confronted Erika. He then adds that he admires his way of thinking, since he considers being too serious all the time boring, and values the way he was able to express his thoughts. After this conversation, Tomasaki heads to the sewing room to inform Ai about what happened and mention that Mizusawa invited him out as a group. Then, Ai tells him that his next task is to ask a girl from the class out. The next morning, we discover that Tomasaki has decided to invite Izumi, using as a pretext the purchase of a gift for Shuji. However, she declines his invitation, arguing that she does not wish to involve the group in her shopping trip. At that moment, Tomasaki explains that he was considering buying a gift for Shuji, since he has realized that he likes him and wants to make amends after what happened in his last game. Upon hearing this, Izumi is emotional because she was also worried that the relationship between them would be strained after the incident. Once classes are over, Tomasaki runs into Mizusawa in the school lockers. He mentions that he is already aware of the news and knows that he has invited Izumi to his outing. Later, she approaches him and tells him that she has noticed that his attitude and haircut have changed lately. Plus, he has been talking with Izumi and Ai. Therefore, you suspect that you have purchased an image advice book. Hearing this, Tomasaki breathes a sigh of relief, since he thought that Mizusawa had discovered that Ai is helping him with his image. Later, we find Tomasaki having dinner with his family when he receives a request to join the outing group with Mizusawa. He takes a moment to reflect on whether it is appropriate to accept the request and finally decides to join. Upon entering the chat, everyone warmly welcomes you and mentions that it took you a long time to accept. Following this, they inform him that the outing will take place at the shopping center. Finally, the big day arrives and we see Tomasaki waiting with Ai. However, he is quite nervous because his mission that day is to make 2 successful suggestions that ensure the group's fun. Then, Izumi and Mizusawa arrive at the meeting point. Mizusawa takes the lead and suggests that the group head to a clothing store. At that moment, Tomasaki realizes that he has not yet said a word. Once at the store, Izumi asks Tomasaki about the gift she should give Shuji. Tomasaki advises him to consider Shuji's tastes when choosing the gift. Suddenly, Izumi realizes that since they met, Mizusawa has only been chatting with Ai. He tells Tomasaki that he has heard rumors that the two are dating. This impresses Tomasaki, who remains thoughtful for a moment, but then decides to let it go, since his priority is to complete the day's mission. Finally, remember that your goal is to control the mood of the group so you can lead it for a time. However, Mizusawa regains control when he suggests that they head to a store that sells hair gel because Izumi has decided to give that to Shuji as a gift. Next, he demonstrates his knowledge on the subject and suggests that Tomasaki also try using hair gel. Tomazaki then informs the boys that he has already decided on the gift he will give to Shuji, so they head to a video game store. Later, Mizusawa suggests visiting a place where they sell 4-cheese pizza. Upon hearing this comment, Tomazaki realizes that he is not the only one who knows Ai's tastes, and once again he becomes interested in the rumor that is circulating about them at school. The next morning, Ai and Tomazaki meet in the sewing room to discuss the failure of their mission. Afterwards, she explains to him that when it comes to making a suggestion, victory goes to whoever can persuade the group to choose that option. Upon hearing this, Tomazaki is surprised, since he realizes that the best suggestion does not always win, but rather it is about being persuasive. In a change of scene, the classroom teacher announces that the student council is looking for new members and that those interested can apply. At that moment, we see that Ai and Minami are running to be part of the student council, which makes them rivals for the position from now on. As usual, Tomazaki and Ai head to the sewing room to announce that they will take a break from their meetings. This is due to Ai's application. Furthermore, he informs him that his next goal is to take on the role of Minami's campaign manager. While heading to the library, Tomazaki meets Minami in the hallway. Take this opportunity to express her desire to be his campaign manager. However, she rejects his proposal due to the lame way he presented it to her. Later, Tomazaki meets Kyufa in the library. She notices that he seems absorbed, so she asks him what's wrong. Tomazaki then tells him that he finds it strange that Minami has decided to run for the student council. At this, she expresses that she suspects that perhaps Minami is doing all this in an attempt to transform herself. Following this, we observe that Tomazaki cannot get Fuka's comment out of his head. He finds it incredible that a person as popular as Minami would want to change his personality. The next morning, we see Minami at the school entrance, actively campaigning. Suddenly, he sees Tomazaki and approaches to greet him. Later, he introduces him to the president of the tennis club, whom he has appointed as his campaign manager. Tomazaki understands his decision and goes into the school. At that moment, he realizes that Mizusawa is Ai's partner and that, in fact, they are both working hard to get votes. After class, Minami meets Tomazaki and gives him her campaign material for the votes. Looking at the poster, he offers to optimize the composition to improve its readability. Once finished, he shows it to Minami, who likes the result. Tomazaki takes advantage of that moment to offer himself again as his assistant in the campaign. Finally, she accepts his offer, but first she would like to understand why Tomazaki is so interested in helping her. So Tomazaki explains that as a video game enthusiast, he enjoys the feeling of beating a powerful player. Therefore, he is willing to help her to see Ai fall. Then, Tomazaki proposes a plan that impresses Minami. They then print an additional poster to the original. Following this, they head to the tennis club. Upon entering, Minami approaches Hanabi directly and begins to entertain her with her witticisms. At that moment, a classmate approaches Minami to ask her to stop bothering Hanabi. Minami takes this opportunity to share her plan. Upon hearing this, they all decide to support her in voting for the student council. Later, Tomazaki and Minami head to a park near the school to discuss the progress they have made in the elections. Afterwards, Tomazaki explains to him that his strategy for the elections would be to take a narrow but deep approach. Intrigued, she asks him what his true intentions are in offering his help. However, Tomazaki cannot answer her question directly, instead redirecting the conversation by asking her what her reasons for running are. She asks Tomazaki if he knows what the biggest mountain in Japan is. He answers that it is Mount Fuji. Then she asks him what the second largest is, but he doesn't know, so she tells him it's Mount Kita. Afterwards, he asks if he remembers who won the Mayo Sports Championship. He replies that it was Ai. When she asks him who came in second place, he doesn't remember who it was. Finally, she explains to him that that's what usually happens. People remember number 1, but forget number 2. Before he can respond, Minami confesses that she came in second place in both the sports and the classroom grades. For this reason, your goal is to evolve as an individual and aspire to reach first place. The next morning, we see Minami full of enthusiasm for the progress she has made thanks to the support of Tomazaki. However, we also notice that Ai has made significant progress in the voting and always seems to be surrounded by people. Next, Tomazaki goes to the volleyball club with the aim of requesting Hanabi's help for sound checks, which are part of his next strategy for the elections. Hanabi, without inquiring into his plans, asks him to take care of Minami, since she has a tendency to overexert herself to achieve her goals. Later, it is revealed to us that Tomazaki's strategy consists of visiting the first-year classrooms to seek votes with the promise of installing air conditioners in the classrooms. Since they are new to school, they do not know that this is something very difficult to achieve. However, that does not mean that they do not believe that it is possible to achieve it. In a change of scene, we see Tomazaki with Ai at school. She tells him that these past few days have been pretty boring since she hasn't had the chance to face Nanashi in TACFUM. However, Tomazaki is surprised to hear her say that, considering that he has competed as Nanashi throughout this entire process. At that moment, something in Ai's gaze transforms and asks her if she can have hope about what may happen in the voting. To which Tomazaki responds that he has displayed his best version for that day. Finally, the votes for the new student council president arrived. The first to give her speech is AI. She lists all the students' complaints and promises to address all their suggestions, including installing air conditioners in all classrooms. This proposal surprises Tomasaki and Minami, since their strategy consisted precisely of what AI just proposed. After her speech, the audience becomes considerably agitated by what they just heard, leaving Minami in a difficult situation. Then it's Minami's turn, who improvises her speech with the help of Tomasaki's plan. Suddenly, all the students hear the voice of an artificial intelligence, which impresses them, since they hear it from all directions. However, the impact of this is left half-hearted due to the blow they received from AI. Finally, the only thing left to do is wait for the voting results. However, we see how AI beats Minami by an overwhelming difference in votes. Later, we see Tomasaki and Minami celebrating the closing of the voting. Afterwards, they make a promise to continue working hard so they can surpass AI in the future. The next morning, the meetings between Tomasaki and AI resume their usual rhythm. So AI confesses that she was impressed by his strategy in the elections, but suggests that, if he wants to beat him, he should have been a little more discreet. Without wasting time, he tells her that it is time for him to complete his next task, asking a girl out. Following this, Tomasaki meets Kyufa in the library. They both take advantage of that moment to immerse themselves in reading Andy's books. Suddenly, Tomasaki starts a conversation with Kyufa and mentions that the weekend is the premiere of Andy's new movie. He proposes that they go see it together and, upon hearing this, Kyufa accepts his invitation with joy, happy to be able to share her appreciation for this author with another person. Later, Tomasaki realizes that what began as an excuse to interact with Kyufa ended up becoming a genuine interest in Andy's books. He gets so immersed in reading that he loses track of time. Once classes are over, Tomasaki finds Hanabi leaning out of the school window watching someone. She tells him that since Minami lost the election several days ago, she's been putting in twice as much effort at club practice. Then, Tomasaki notices that Minami is practicing with AI on the school field, but he cannot reach her. Hanabi confesses that she is a little afraid of facing AI, since it seems impossible to beat her. To this, Tomasaki responds that he is glad that Minami is able to face him. The next morning, as usual, Tomasaki meets with AI to talk about his progress in the game of life. She tells him that lately Minami has been trying harder at club practices, to the point of arriving at practice before her. Later, Tomasaki runs into Minami in the school hallways. She jokes with him, because when he saw her he got very nervous and asks him if he finally decided to confess his love for her. Hearing this, he asks her to stop bothering him about it and tells her that he heard from AI that she has improved in her club practices. He then expresses his support in his rivalry with AI, so she thanks him for this gesture and invites him to eat with her in the school cafeteria. However, Tomasaki rejects her, preferring to eat in the school store. That afternoon, Tomasaki meets Hanabi again, who is observing AI and Minami's practice. He then asks if Minami has always been like this when it comes to exceeding expectations. However, she confesses that she hasn't known Minami for long and it wasn't until she approached that they started talking. She explains that they are actually friends thanks to AI, who suggested to Minami that she start playing pranks to get closer to her, something she greatly appreciates. Over time, thanks to that, she began to have friends in the classroom and to feel comfortable at school. In a scene change, we are shown a memory of Minami in high school, where he faces off against AI in a basketball game during the school games. That day was the first time they faced each other, and AI's school was the winner. Despite this, Minami's classmates were happy with the result, something she was not happy with. However, because everyone agreed, Minami decided to go along with it for the first time, just so as not to create an awkward atmosphere. After this, we watch as Minami works so hard on her studies that she reaches the point of exhaustion. Once he wakes up, he goes out to train in his neighborhood. The next morning, the teacher scolds Minami for sleeping in class, something she denies, arguing that she only fainted for a moment. Realizing this, Tomasaki and Hanabi look at Minami's condition with concern, since this behavior is not normal for her. Next, as is customary, Tomasaki goes to the library at each class change. There, he meets with Fuka to enjoy reading his favorite author. While they are there, she tells Tomasaki that she has noticed that Minami is exhausted since she lost in the election. So he asks if Minami is trying to compete against AI. At his comment, Tomasaki is surprised and asks him where he heard it. She explains that she didn't hear it anywhere. However, she can imagine what happens, since she always reflects on the reason behind people's actions. This type of thinking helps her describe her characters. However, when he sees AI, he cannot decipher the reasons behind her actions. Once again, Tomasaki meets with Hanabi to observe Minami's practice. Then, they both head to where the girls are to return home together. When Tomasaki and Minami are alone, he takes that opportunity to ask her if she's been trying so hard because she still wants to beat AI. Then she confesses that she actually wants to quit, but she's tried so hard that it would be a shame to leave things halfway. Consequently, Tomasaki once again encourages Minami and gives him all his support in the goal ahead. The next morning, AI arrives for the club's morning practices and, to her surprise, discovers that Minami had already arrived at practice even before her. Afterwards, they begin their training. In the middle of it, we see Manami stumbling around, distracted by her thoughts about her time in high school, and how she's always been beaten by AI ever since. In a scene change, Tomasaki and AI meet in the sewing room. There, she expresses her concern for Manami, as she is sure that she will soon collapse due to the effort she is putting in. Next, Tomasaki asks AI the reason for Manami's obsession with beating her. Then, AI admits that it's because in high school she was the one who caused Manami's team to lose. However, she clarifies that this is not a story she should tell him. This is why we see Tomasaki turning to the president of the volleyball club to tell her what happened. That afternoon, Tomasaki meets Hanabi again to observe Manami and AI's practice. But it starts to rain, so they are sure they won't go out to train anymore. However, they are amazed to see someone come out onto the field. They head towards her thinking it was Manami, but when they get closer, they realize that it is AI, and that Manami has already gone home. In a scene change, we see Manami looking a little discouraged. In fact, he missed morning practice that day. At the end of classes, Hanabi asks her if she is going to train, to which she replies that she will go later. However, Tomasaki realizes that Manami has also missed afternoon practice, so he decides to go after her. He manages to catch up with her at the subway station and tells her that he has learned the story that led to his rivalry with AI. She explains that she realized a long time ago that she doesn't shine like AI does. It all started when she lost to AI. In an attempt to adapt to the mood of the others, he smiled. After his defeat, he decided to go to the finals of the tournament where AI's team lost. However, unlike her, AI expressed her discontent in front of everyone and continued with her goal of always being number one. Since that day, she admits that AI is the person she admires the most. Precisely for that reason, he doesn't want to lose to her. Upon hearing all this, Tomasaki tells her that, in his opinion, she shines quite a bit. After talking to her, he realizes that what he said wasn't enough to comfort her. The next morning, during his morning meeting with AI, she informs him that Manami did not attend practice that day. Then, Tomasaki expresses to him that he does not understand his obsession with always being first, since for him the most important thing is to improve himself. AI is surprised to hear this, because she thought Tomasaki shared her same thoughts. Following this, we learn that Manami has formally requested to leave the athletics club, which causes AI to turn to her to ask what's going on. Therefore, Manami tells him that his body needs a rest, and that is why he will leave it for a while. At the end of class, Tomasaki gathers courage and asks to go home with Manami in front of the entire class, adding that Hanabi will also go with them. On the way to the station, they sit in front of the river and Hanabi asks Manami why she left the club. Then, she confesses to them that she is envious of AI, who always beats her at everything. However, he doesn't want to continue feeling that way, so he prefers to stay away from her. After listening to her carefully, Hanabi tells her that it doesn't matter if she isn't the best at everything, since to her, Manami is a hero. Also, if she still wants to be first, Hanabi mentions that she is, in fact, the #1 fool. The next morning, Manami apologizes to her track club teammates and returns to the team. However, Manami's harassment of Hanabi has doubled since that talk. So the days passed and, finally, the summer holidays arrived. But before classes end, Tomasaki has one more mission to complete. That mission is to deliver the birthday gift to Shuji and talk to him for at least 3 minutes. Tomasaki gathers courage and talks to him, but AI waves to him from the end of the room, warning him that he still has to continue talking to Shuji. Due to AI's pressure, Tomasaki ends up saying the first thing that comes to mind and asks Shuji if it is true that AI and Mizusawa are dating. In a scene change, we see Manami mocking Tomasaki for what happened earlier, and takes that opportunity to ask AI if the rumors are true, to which she responds that the rumors are not true. Manami then changes the subject and apologizes for their behavior. Then, he gives them some keychains for their bags as a token of their friendship. Once the summer holidays began, Tomasaki thought he would be able to take a break from his missions. However, AI informs him that, in fact, that day they are going to have a mock date as training for their departure with Kyufa. Later, we see that AI gave her a to-do list for her date and how she continues to pretend to have no idea where he's taking her. The first place they visit is a clothing store, since Tomasaki does not have summer clothes and what he is wearing is not in the best condition. Next, AI shows him a bag she was carrying and tells him that she realized he needed one. However, Tomasaki refuses to accept his gift. Then she explains that she was going to get rid of the bag anyway because it's a little worn out, and that makes her uncomfortable. In addition, she clarifies that it will not be free, so she suggests that he buy a gift for her in exchange. Tomasaki realizes that she is doing this so that he does not feel indebted, so he decides to accept so that she feels comfortable. Then, they head to the video game store where they play a game of Takfam and, as expected, Tomasaki wins. Finally, they visit a cafe where AI gives him Kyufa's number. However, he hesitates to add her, as he doesn't know what she will think if she is suddenly added. Therefore, AI tells him that she asked Kyufa if she could give him her contact number. In this way, he ends up saving her number, but he still needs to send her a message, a task that AI leaves to him. Then, he tells him that he can relax, since Kyufa is usually slow to respond. However, Tomasaki informs AI that, in fact, Kyufa already responded to him and they confirmed a date to see Andy's movie. After this, AI tells him that he should leave that weekend free because he will go with her and her group to a barbecue to unite Shuji and Izumi. Upon hearing this news, Tomasaki feels overwhelmed by the amount of information and doubts his ability to interact with such a large group. She assures him that it is a good opportunity to make friends and that it will help improve his conversational skills. There, Tomasaki realizes the effort that AI made to include him in the outing, so he decides to accept the invitation. Then, she informs him that the next day they will have a strategy meeting at Minami's house and that their mission is to face Mizusawa 3 times. Otherwise, you'll end up being the guy the group picks on for agreeing on everything. Additionally, he adds that mild teasing and challenging people when they disagree are key to making friends on equal terms. The next morning, the first to arrive at the meeting point is Mizusawa, so Tomasaki has to be alone with him for a moment. Mizusawa then asks Tomasaki if he now has a fashion advisor who is helping him escape from the world of losers. Due to his comment, Tomasaki realizes that he is being mocked and wonders if he will be able to face that boy. Later, AI arrives and everyone heads to Minami's house for their meeting. However, she informs them that they will not be able to meet at her house because her grandmother stopped by unexpectedly. Therefore, AI suggests the group go to Tomasaki's house, who lives nearby. Once there, Tomasaki's sister is impressed when she sees the most popular kids at school at her house, and he tells his mother that Tomasaki brought friends to the house, which she cannot believe, and decides to celebrate by buying cake for everyone. Because of this, Mizusawa comments that his family seems to be fun, to which Tomasaki tells him that in no way what he said was a compliment. Next, we see Minami searching Tomasaki's room where he hides his forbidden content, but the only thing he finds is a box with controls to play TACFAM that seem worn from use. Then, Tomasaki explains that he is hesitant about throwing them away since they are still in good condition to play other games. At that moment, Mizusawa notices that AI is distracted by the controls, so she pretends not to be too interested by making a joke about it. Finally, their meeting begins to plan how to pair Shuji with Izumi, so Minami comments that they have to take a brave walk through the forest without a doubt to unite them. Mizusawa then comments that since they are going to a barbecue, they should make the fire together. Tomasaki realizes that this is the moment to make a suggestion, and explains that it is not a good idea because lighting the fire has a high level of difficulty, and they would not be able to concentrate on talking. After this, Mizusawa mentions that they should hurry since when classes start they will be busy with exams, so they won't be able to see each other for a while. This leaves him thoughtful, so Tomasaki takes the opportunity to joke by asking if he is embarrassed with them. Next, Tomasaki goes to the kitchen to get water and thinks about how committed the boys are to bringing Shuji and Izumi together. When she goes back to the room, she meets Mizusawa in the bathroom, who tells her that she saw his hair styling cream but it doesn't seem like he uses it much. Then, Tomasaki tells him that he is still practicing how to use it. This is why Mizusawa asks him to show him how he does it. Next, we see that Tomasaki is a disaster at combing his hair. Therefore, Mizusawa offers to teach him how to do it. Therefore, Tomasaki asks him to wait a moment since he would like to record what he says to practice later. At that moment, Mizusawa tells him that she has noticed that he is very committed to the things he does, like the time he helped Minami in the presidential election. So Tomasaki explains that he doesn't like losing in games and considers himself a player. So Mizusawa tells him that he understands what he means, because life is like a game in every sense. Once they return to the room, the girls realize that Tomasaki's hairstyle is different. Additionally, Mizusawa has started calling Tomasaki by his first name. The next morning, Tomasaki heads to his appointment with Kyufa. When he sees her arrive, he is impressed because he cannot believe that she has come. After watching the movie, they go to a restaurant where Tomasaki realizes that he hasn't stopped talking since they left watching the movie. Therefore, he fills the spaces of silence with the topics learned that AI gave him. Seeing Tomasaki's sudden change, Kyufa tells him that sometimes it is difficult for him to talk to him because he changes his way of being suddenly. Later, both of them are silent in the carriage on the way home when Kyufa breaks the silence and mentions that she hopes he doesn't misunderstand what she said earlier, since she had a lot of fun that day and would like to go out with him again. On the way home, Tomasaki receives a call from AI, who deduced the exact moment their date ended. He tells her what happened and she suggests improving his social skills to close the distance between him and Kyufa. That same night, Tomasaki comes up with the idea of inviting Kyufa to the New Year's Eve fireworks, to which she quickly accepts. However, Tomasaki remains thoughtful regarding what Kyufa said about him. In a scene change, we see Tomasaki waiting for Minami to go together to the meeting point with the other boys. While they were on their way, Minami takes advantage of the fact that they are alone to thank him for everything he did for her when she was depressed. Once reunited with the group, Take takes a photo as a souvenir of that trip. Finally, he begins his plan to unite Shuji and Izumi, but Tomasaki is worried that Take was not at the meeting. However, AI tells him that she didn't tell him because he is always absent-minded and wouldn't be much help. Afterwards, he calls Tomasaki apart from the group to tell him that his objective on this trip is to contradict Shuji 3 times. Additionally, he tells him that he should work on being friendlier with Mizusawa because he seems like the likely prospect to be his friend. Apart from that, he is the perfect person to increase your social experience. Later, they arrive at the camping area and AI divides the group by tasks, thus ending up with Tomasaki in charge of the fire. Because of this, when they are alone, Tomasaki asks him what he has to tell him. Then, she explains that she didn't put them together because of that but because Shuji and Izumi were the most likely to prepare the food. On the other hand, setting up tents requires muscle and Take is perfect for that. Additionally, Mizusawa is a leader by nature, so he will lead the group and Minami can adapt to any circumstance, which leaves Tomasaki out of the statistics. Next, she confesses that she also gets tired of acting all the time and she paired up with him so she could take a break from that. After this, Tomasaki watches how the boys have fun and thinks that if he had not met AI, that scene would seem ridiculous to him. But now he feels that it could be funny. After eating, the boys prepare to bathe in the river. Tomasaki realizes that the plan to unite Shuji and Izumi is going well, so he tries to entertain Take. But he sneaks away without him noticing, and goes to Izumi to show her a crayfish, which impresses her and causes her to fall backwards. Luckily, she is saved by Shuji, while Take apologizes to her for scaring her. Seeing this, Tomasaki sighs with relief, because what Take did worked to unite them more. Later, we see that the boys are gathered in the campsite rooms. Suddenly, Shuji tries to send Tomasaki to look for some letters because he is bored, but he is saved by Mizusawa, who asks Shuji what is happening with his ex-girlfriend who still writes to him to meet him, even though she has a new boyfriend. At that moment, Tomasaki realizes that Shuji is far above him and that he almost ended up as the errand boy in the group. Later, Shuji tells them that he doesn't know what to do with his ex-girlfriend, because it's hard to let go of a girl with such a big body. Hearing this, Tomasaki makes a face, which Shuji notices and asks him what he is thinking. Then, Tomasaki tells him that if things are like this with his ex-girlfriend, that means that she is simply cheating on him. Immediately afterward, everyone starts laughing at this. Afterwards, Mizusawa asks Shuji if he doesn't have another girl in mind. So he tells her that he's not really sure because the girl he likes goes to him for romantic advice. Later, we see that Mizusawa and Tomasaki are texting on the phone with the girls. They comment that Izumi asked the boy she likes for romantic advice. Through this act, the boys inform them that it seems that their love is mutual, since Shuji told them the same thing. At that moment, Take interrupts them and tells them that the time has come. This comment leaves Tomasaki confused, who later realizes that they are going to the girls' room. After arriving, they stare at each other not knowing what to do, so Minami suggests playing cards. Later, we see that Tomasaki and AI are competing to see who wins the most games. Finally, AI takes the lead in the game and beats Tomasaki. Seeing this situation, Mizusawa asks them why they take this game so seriously. Then, Take comments that in all the games he finished last. At that moment, Izumi says that she understands because she ended up worse than a beggar in the game. Shuji then mocks them both for being so bad at the game. So Tomasaki takes advantage of that opportunity to mess with him and says that in that case, Shuji was left as a commoner. Immediately afterwards, everyone in the room begins to laugh at his comment. To change the topic of conversation, Shuji mentions that Mizusawa has been flirting with a girl from another school. Hearing this, the girls get happy and ask him to reveal his relationship with that girl. However, he tells them that he only goes out with her occasionally, and there is nothing between them. At that moment, he informs the boys that he must go to the bathroom, to which they all make fun of him thinking that he is running away from the conversation. At the same time, Tomasaki says that he needs to go to the bathroom and Mizusawa escapes the laughter of the boys. Later, we see that they are in the bathrooms and Tomasaki has a conversation with Mizusawa about the girl from the other school. Then he confesses to her that he actually doesn't like her, but he might end up being her boyfriend. Upon hearing this, Tomasaki tells him that he sees no reason to be with a person he doesn't like. This comment leaves Mizusawa thoughtful, who tells him that the boys must already be waiting for them at the hot springs. Once inside the bathrooms, the boys are impressed with Tomasaki's forearm-sized figure. So Take walks over to tease him and lifts him up so everyone can see his body. Therefore, Tomasaki begins to kick until he falls into the water at waist-height Shuji. And when she sees him, she realizes that this is her chance to annoy him and says out loud that what she sees is tiny. Immediately afterwards, the boys begin to laugh very loudly, which the girls hear on the other side of the bathroom, and they realize that they cannot count on Tomasaki and Mizusawa for the moment. Later, it's time for the main event, the courageous walk they must take in the middle of the dark forest. The plan is for Shuji and Izumi to get close while doing this activity. After the lovebirds left, the rest agree to play rock, paper, scissors to see how they distribute themselves to make the walk. Finally, AI and Tomasaki are alone and she tells him that, taking advantage of this moment, she will have special training. Suddenly, she lunges towards Tomasaki because an insect was nearby, and he realizes that all this attitude is due to her plan to intimidate him. Then, while they are walking, Tomasaki sees a cicada that seems to be alive perched on the ground and scares it away so that it scares AI. which she achieves because she ends up falling to the ground and tells Tomasaki to help her stand up because she can't due to fear. However, when he gets closer, she puts her arms around his neck and begins to slowly approach his face. At that moment, Tomasaki realizes that she is doing all this to provoke him and make him retreat first, but he is determined to beat her. Although he ends up backing away when he sees that AI wasn't going to stop, and on the way to the camp, he is left wondering what would have happened if he hadn't backed down. Once they meet up with the guys, Take records a video of them sharing their experience on the Courage Walk. They notice that the dynamic between Shuji and Izumi has changed, but it doesn't seem like they've started dating. Mizusawa then reveals that Shuji confessed to him that he and Izumi had agreed to spend time together. This discourages the boys, as they were hoping that Shuji and Izumi would start a relationship during that trip. Consequently, AI turns to Mizusawa and asks him to give them advice, since out of everyone in the group, he is the one with the most dating experience. In addition, he expresses his support and wishes him luck with the girl from the other school. Later, while everyone is sleeping, Tomasaki receives a message from AI to meet. She questions him about his progress within the group and if he has managed to complete the mission he was given. Next, Tomasaki begins to recount the occasions on which he interacted with Shuji. The first time was when they were in the room and he confessed to her about his ex-girlfriend. Following that, during a card game, he commented that he had been left in an unfavorable position in the game, similar to a commoner. Afterwards, Tomasaki remains thoughtful, debating whether to tell him about the third time. However, due to AI's insistence, he reveals that he had made a joke about his lower half. Suddenly, they hear someone approaching, which makes Tomasaki nervous and he decides to hide. At that moment, we see that it is Mizusawa, who greets AI and tells her that he was convinced that she was meeting with Tomasaki. She tells him that, as he can see, that is not the case, and he decides to sit next to her. Later, Mizusawa begins to talk to him about Shuji, Izumi, and Tomasaki, expressing his admiration for the sincerity with which they handle their feelings. After this, he mentions that Tomasaki once expressed to him that he sees life as a game. That got Mizusawa thinking that he sees himself as a person holding the controller, where it's not him who takes the hits, but his character. Furthermore, he feels that he is not the one who has fun or is happy. AI then asks him if what he's trying to say is that he's the player watching himself from a distance. So he explains to her that what he's doing is putting on a big show. However, she has realized that she is also watching what is happening from a distance as if she were a player. She recognizes that what he says is true. However, Tomasaki, who is hidden, perceives that she has not yet been completely open with Mizusawa and that the AI, who is speaking, is not the real one. Mizusawa also notices this and confesses that he likes her. Although he is convinced that she will reject him, he still hoped that she would be a little more open with him. Before he can continue with his statement, Tomasaki comes out of hiding and apologizes for having been listening to the conversation. Next, AI explains that they met when Tomasaki was leaving the bathroom, and when he approached she hid so that he would not misinterpret the situation. In a change of scene, we see that the boys are riding the subway on their way home. Tomasaki, for his part, is deep in thought about what happened between Mizusawa and AI. He considers that both of them are similar to some extent, but in essence they are different, since AI decided to keep his mask in front of him at all times. This situation leads him to reflect on what is happening between him and Kyufa. He feels that if he continues to follow AI's instructions, he will only be putting on a show, and not be himself. The next morning, Tomasaki meets with Kyufa to enjoy the fireworks. While they walk, he tells her what the barbecue with the boys was like, seeming more relaxed than the last time they were together. Later, they head to a hill to enjoy the event from the best possible location. Kyufa tells him that since she was a child she had not seen fireworks, to which Tomasaki responds that it is the same for him. It is then when Tomasaki reflects on how good he is having, without the need to pretend or resort to pre-established conversation topics. Therefore, he asks Kyufa what his experience was like talking to him. She responds that it was easy for her to follow the conversation. After dropping Kyufa off at the subway station near her house, AI writes to see her and talk about what happened on their date. However, Tomasaki confesses that he did not ask Kyufa to go out with him. At that moment, he tells her that he did not resort to memorize conversation topics that night, which contributed to Kyufa feeling comfortable with him. Then, she expresses to him that she understands where he wants to go and that if he changes the course of things, that would mean that he is abandoning his personal growth. It all ends the instant you let go of control, so he asks her to give him his backpack back. Then, he hands her the bag clip that he had given her in exchange for the bag. At that moment, he reflects on how his goal was to close the gap between them, but he lost a relationship that he thought he had as easily as if it were nothing. This is all because he is a lower-level character. After having that conversation with AI, Tomasaki locks himself in his room for the next few days playing his favorite game with a blank look on his face. Because he is so immersed in the game, he doesn't hear that his younger sister has been knocking on his room door for a while to let him know that dinner is ready. Once he leaves the room, the sister confronts him and asks what is happening, Well, she thought he had improved a lot, even surprising her by bringing popular friends to the house. Tomasaki doesn't have much to say about it and continues with his apathetic face until his sister tells him that a girl wrote to him 2 days ago. When he checks his phone, he realizes it's Kyufa inviting him to buy Andy's new book. He agrees to accompany her and apologizes for taking so long to respond. Seeing that his brother has finally shown some feeling, he encourages him to keep going and assumes that he must be going through some difficult situations. The next morning, while heading to the meeting point with Kyufa, he is left thinking about the courage she had to have to invite him, and yet he left her message unanswered for 2 days. That is why that day he will try to be as spontaneous as possible, this time without learned conversation topics, even wearing his old way of dressing, because regardless of how their friendship started, he would like to be honest with her and show her his true self. Because of this, their conversations were awkward and hesitant, but it was as if he was connected to someone using his true feelings. Finally, they arrive at the bookstore, and before going to get Andy's new book, Kyufa shows Tomasaki a book that he really likes, which turns out to be a romance. This impresses Tomasaki, who didn't think she read those types of books. Then, she tells him that, in fact, she would like her novels to have writing similar to that book she had in her hands. After that, they buy Andy's new book and head to a restaurant. Before the food arrives, Tomasaki takes the opportunity to go to the bathroom. In that place, while looking in the mirror, he thinks that day he wanted to be himself, but he realized that without the clothes and skills he had practiced with AI, his expression and posture looked hollow and immature. Because of this, he realizes that what he said to AI was not entirely true, for as he worked to improve his appearance and conversational skills, he felt accomplished. It got to the point where he didn't believe he was in a game, but instead felt like a real character. Once he returns from the bathroom, he confesses to Kyufa that all this time, since he's known her, someone has been helping him with his social skills. He even had to learn conversation starter cards. However, since they saw the fireworks, he has decided to be himself. That is why he asks Kyufa for his opinion on the situation he has been going through. Well, it didn't seem fair to her that he always wore a mask in the conversation in front of her. He then asks if he should continue working on improving his social skills or just be himself. At that moment, she explains to him that the reason she finds it easy to talk to him is because she can imagine what he says, since many times she feels like she says whatever comes to her mind at the moment, and now she knows that it is because of the cards she memorized. However, before they began to talk, she saw that his world was gray and colorless, so she thought that perhaps he was just like her. But since he began to improve his social skills, the world around him appears with much more color, as does the history of his favorite authors. That's why she thinks it's great that he was able to change her world in such a short time. Also, if there is someone in your world who brought so much color to your surroundings, that person must be special, and you should treasure them. Later, we see that Tomasaki reflected on the advice Kyufa had given him and decided to write to AI to discuss the situation. However, she responds indifferently and tells him that they have nothing to talk about. Tomasaki insists on meeting her, using the return of the bag as a pretext, until she finally agrees to meet at the subway station. The next morning, we see that AI arrives at the location with some reluctance. Therefore, Tomasaki suggests that they go somewhere else to talk and, without further ado, takes the initiative to take her to the place where they met for the first time. Then, she mocks him, asking him what other excuse he's going to make up. Therefore, Tomasaki confesses that before he met her, his world was gray and emotionless. The reason he likes video games is because he can experience them without feeling resentful towards himself, as if I were living through the characters from the other side of the screen. Instead, in real life, he was just Tomasaki, and with that character there wasn't much he could accomplish, until she started teaching him how to play the game of life. Later, Tomasaki expresses that he wants to continue improving his social skills, but without leaving aside his true desires. Upon hearing this, AI points out that she is just letting her feelings get the better of her, and that, for her, this kind of thing doesn't exist. Therefore, he clarifies to her that precisely because of that way of thinking, he has never been able to beat her in Takfam, since he lacks desires. So until that point, he has also surpassed her in the game of life, because he really does have fun. Then, he confesses that he would like to continue improving his character in real life, and that for that he needs her. AI then warns him that there will be times when his teachings conflict with his desires. After this, Tomasaki explains that, in that case, he will follow his feelings to make decisions. Immediately afterwards, she agrees to resume her role as a guide to help him achieve his goals, and together they head to the restaurant that she likes so much. There, we observe that Tomasaki shows greater self-confidence and orders a salted fish, a choice that she accepts despite being a cheese enthusiast. Afterwards, AI points out that they have wasted quite a bit of time so far, so they decided to resume their training immediately. Then, he reveals that his next goal will be to get a part-time job. In a change of scene, we see that Tomasaki attends a job interview. However, upon arriving at the place, he realizes that Mizusawa also works there and realizes that this is all AI is doing. Mizusawa then wishes him luck in the interview and leaves the site. Later, Tomasaki meets with the boys, and we notice that he has managed to strengthen ties with the group. He then shows us that his friendship with Kyufa continues to progress and she asks him to read her new novel to find out his opinion about it. Finally, we see that Tomasaki has gotten the part-time job and is trained by Mizusawa. They end up attending to the boys who are there, and we realize that Tomasaki feels much more comfortable in his surroundings and can finally be himself.